As I said before, my name's Ben Casella. I'm a staff member with New Jersey Farm Bureau. One of the main issues I cover is dealing with labor issues. I also cover pesticide, water, trucking. Trucking is probably the other big issue that I'm involved in that we get a lot of questions on. But the labor side of it is kind of runs the gamut from New Jersey, dealing with New Jersey Department of Labor regulations, U.S. Department of Labor, and then also tied with that is DEP under the Worker Protection Standards and New Jersey or I should say EPA and New Jersey DEP with their Bureau of Pesticide rules. So that's kind of the main issues I deal with. And what will happen is growers will call the farmhouse, either having a question, a concern, wanting additional information. And that's where we kind of step in as staff, is either updating them on the information they need, or maybe if it's a little in depth or beyond what we can provide, try and get them in touch with the right people that could get them that answer. So that's kind of, what I do, and especially like with H2A, I get a lot of growers that'll inquire, they've heard about it, what's involved, and I'll give them the broad overview of all the issues. And then if they don't jump off ship by that point, I recommend them to, talk to another grower, or as well, there's sheets, or I should say, areas where you can find different providers such as Moz or FEWA, or all the organizations. We don't work specifically. We don't have a relationship with one, so we don't recommend a specific one. But probably the best advice we give is talk to somebody that's involved.
Yeah, and that's another benefit you get from being a Farm Bureau member, is you can call up here and ask questions and hopefully not bug you too much like I do.
No, that's our job.
But yeah, a lot of the times, like especially when it came to COVID, a lot of people had questions, and these guys were a big resource when it came to that. So, Alex, how about you?
We are, it says nursery stock grower, about a half an hour south of here. I have been, I assume you want me to keep it to labor each to it. I moved my farm to H2A 4 years ago. So our 5th season is upcoming now. We moved to H2A due to an inability to staff our farm appropriately with the amount of good, consistent, quality laborers who will show up every day, not leave 1 week from now, and somebody pays them a quarter extra legal. And we just kind of hit a breaking point where we couldn't staff the place the same way we did 20, 30 years ago. And so we moved to H2A in 2019. I still do have a domestic workforce. Our domestic workforce includes in the neighborhood of about 100 and, or sorry, so my domestic workforce is maybe 40 people. And this year I'll be bringing in 82 H2A people. And when you bring in 82 H2A people, every thing is magnified, right? So your housing is times 3 or 4, because you have 3 or 4 houses. We actually bring in multiple contracts. So I have people who work from the beginning of this season, March, through the end, till all the houses are covered in November. And then I have like a couple contracts that are just from like shipping peak, and one contract that's just from a potting season. So we really learned with the help of the people at Moss Labor to massage our labor force to fit the seasonal nature of business. That's it for now. Here to answer the question. That's that.
Yeah, so as I said earlier, I'm Emily, and obviously we work with you, but yeah, we are the leading provider in H2A and H2B visas. It doesn't stand for this, but H2A is mainly agricultural work, so probably the main topic today. But basically, a lot of employers nowadays, they can't find anyone to do any of this work, and nobody wants to work, and so we pride ourselves in providing that and taking you through the filing process. Just because there are so many different compliance and education pieces that need to be kept up with. And so we keep up with everything on the government side, educate you as an employer, and then take you through the whole filing. And then you get assigned to a dedicated case manager who stays on with you when you have these workers as well as doing your filing. And then we also offer audit support services. So basically, we're just here for all your labor needs.
Awesome. No, thank you. And how many people in here use H2A already? Yes, some people are a little bit familiar with it. And when Rebecca, Liv, and I were kind of talking about what can we do that's going to provide some value to this group, this was kind of like a topic we wanted to tackle, was like finding not just H2A but farm workers, and then H2A has become more of a, I don't want to say a solution, but an option that I know Steve took advantage of, and then you convinced me to take advantage of it. So we want to make sure we talk about that, because can be a little bit scary when you're talking about contracts and immigration and all this other stuff. It's complex.
Right.
So, but Alex, I want to ask you a question first. As the farmer in the room, what do you think caused, like, what made it harder to find people to do those kind of jobs?
I guess I can't really speak to a comparative state, because I used to be on the retail end of ornamental horticulture, and I switched to growing about 11, 12 years ago now. So it's always been hard for my time period when I needed a lot of labor. So I can't really speak to the way it used to be. But I don't know what changed, but there, especially when you need volume like we do, when we need 150 people to get through our peak shipping season, it's just the reliable staff is not there. One thing that did change for us, I don't know if any of you dealt with contract laborers prior to dealing with your H2A, what you're doing now. But I mean, my first year there, I had just walked in the door at Medford Nursery, and a month later I get audited by the DOL to find that my predecessor had been doing everything wrong in dealing with the contract crews, and we got a major slap on the hand. I said, all right, I don't want to do this anymore. So that changed the way we stared. Let's couldn't just call in all the contractors. And then it was just a pipeline out of Bridgeton, pipeline out of Trenton, and that is as shaky as it could be. And that's what made me decide, all right, that's it. It's the end of the line. We gotta do this, after a couple of years of trying to manage it that way.
Yeah, and then Steve, you kind of had a similar experience, right?
Yeah, I've had every different kind of labor contractor,
Right.
local help. We got basically to the point where it wasn't jumping out at us to find help. I mean, if you really, really dug, you could find somebody to fill in, but it wasn't consistent.
Not consistent. No.
And that was with our nursery. We kind of had a similar thing where we were using a contract labor company out of Trenton, and the core group was good and was consistent. But when we were in our potting season, our peak need areas,
Right.
we were getting people and they come in for 2 days and then we wouldn't see them again. And then we would keep getting new people, but then every time you're training new people, you're processing through all the other things you need to get them and all that. And there was just so much turnover that it was really slowing us down. And that's why we switched into H2A a little bit. But even outside of that, it was just hard to find people domestically that were willing to do some of the stuff. And I wasn't sure if it's a scale thing or if it's like with our company as we grew and got bigger, that's why we couldn't find the people to do some of those entry-level jobs, or if it was a work ethic thing or a generational thing. So it looks like you want to say something.
I'm on the end where I receive all these calls coming in, like asking how we can help, and trying to learn about H2A. And they all say the same thing, like all over the US, but nobody wants to work. And it's anyone who wants like, even just like one worker to like 100, like either scale, but, yeah, no, the beauty of the H2A program is we have employers with like the same generation of family, but like 3 generations coming back. So, these workers are actually really great.
And Alex, have you found success in hiring in any other areas, or is it H2A has been kind of like a last resort because you couldn't find success?
Oh, no. I do not actively, when it comes to, I assume you're just talking about labor.
Yeah.
I do not, outside of, you know, when Moss Labor puts my job on the required website, I do not actively seek domestic labor in any issues.
Wonderful.
I, you know, and as domestic people quit, I deal with it. If I'm short 5 people for the season, I say next year it's going to be 5 H2A people. And I know, you know, granted, I have to interview and hire anybody domestically that comes in. But because I have not actively gone down that avenue in quite a few years, nobody's really coming in.
Yeah.
Which I'm happy with.
Yeah. And Ben, from Farm Bureau's perspective, what do you see?
Turn that off.
Required.
I do, it's legally required, but nobody's coming in, you know what I mean, which to me is a good thing.
But even if even people who are,
Yeah.
even people who are just starting off, say they've been looking and nobody comes in, so
Yeah.
I think it'd be a problem even if you weren't.
Right, but to your point earlier, you dig hard enough, you're gonna get some people to show up who might last 2 days or 2 weeks, which is a waste of labor dollars.
Yeah.
See, all the way. You know that most of them aren't legal, you know what I mean, they're showing up like when they're just showing up at your doors, so I'm glad that pipeline has stopped.
Well, I mean, you know, and in that case, I get a lot of growers that are in the program and you're required to recruit up or receive interview workers up to 50% of the contract. That's something, you know, I try and make them be aware is that you meet that obligation, you meet with them and interview them in whatever capacity may need be, phone or whatever, because we have had growers get caught in that situation that did not respond and get a significant fine from DOL regarding not following through on that. So that, you know, that's one thing I want to, you know, I was trying growers that are involved, you know, make sure, you know, because sometimes it'll, you know, we've had issues where Puerto Rico may, through their SWA, their labor, may send names to a grower, a list of names.
Yeah.
And you want to make sure you at least follow through with them.
You know, that's interesting, because, you know, right now I am getting inundated because I am in a recruitment period. And I'm getting inundated with, you know, people who find my name and they're sending me their resume from Mexico or Haiti or whatever. I don't answer those because I'm not obligated to answer those, because they're from another country. Correct. But I never thought, oh, maybe this one's from Puerto Rico.
There we go.
I forgot that it's part of the country.
Yeah.
I don't think I got it. I'm gonna go back and check.
Yeah.
You know, it never occurred to me, you know.
I'm glad you said you don't answer because I've been getting a whole bunch of those emails now too, and I was gonna ask Alyssa from your office, what am I supposed to do here? Because I got like 40 emails now that
I don't know.
are flooding my inbox. I wasn't sure what I'm supposed to do with that.
Yeah, well, now they've changed it and the like employers email us in the contract, so.
Yeah, you guys used to have to deal with them now.
Yeah.
No, we
Which
get it.
is, yeah,
And we do not have to answer, correct?
no, and we can handle that like on your behalf, you can
Okay.
forward all of those to your.
Got it.
Well, I've elected to handle domestic.
Okay,
Well, actually, they're not domestic, they're from another country, but yeah, I could forward them to you guys, but I just don't answer because I think I asked years ago. So,
So,
Okay.
and Ben, what I was gonna ask you is what other options does Farm Bureau see for farmers when it comes to finding help on the farm? Are there other domestic programs or just option job boards?
You know, and that's really talking to growers. I mean, it was funny, I was giving a presentation to Annie's project and really, you know, and I'm from South Jersey where it's a large wholesale, large farms using large amount of hand labor. really the best method down there has been through word of mouth. A lot of the workers, or I should say, a lot of the workers are returning workers. So, and, just by communication with the farmer to his workers, I may need additional help. A lot of times they have contacts either from wherever they say they came from Florida or their home country. That's where a lot of them are sourced just from personal relationships. And then beyond that, then there's the crew leaders. There's a lot of them that would service South Jersey because of the demand for labor. So quite a few have started using crew leaders again. But that also comes with its caution of the joint liability responsibility that, whatever the crew leader does, you could be held responsible. So we always encourage growers. A lot of them like to just give the crew leader a check to pay the workers and not have to be burdened with the payroll and all that. And you want to be very cautious of that because you're responsible as an employer. A lot of them they'll supply the workers, but then the farmer will take them on as an employee and just pay them a paycheck like they would any other employee to guarantee that they're getting what they're supposed to. But, and then beyond that, I've heard of some growers in North Jersey using temp agencies in a pinch, when they may not need workers for a long period of time. That may, for a short period, they've used those avenues, and then outside of, there's really not a ARS program, which used to be an ag recruitment system with Puerto Rico anymore. That used to be a source, but that's really not in play anymore. It's not well used.
No, this is like more of a personal question I have in our business, but going back to the crew leaders, you said there's that joint responsibility. And that's, I guess, one of the concerns we've always had from a crew leader perspective is the legality of the employee. How does that always fall from, would the employer actually be liable for some of that, or is that just
when you say legality,
like their legal status in the
country? You're talking about whether they're documented or undocumented. Technically, if you're paying them, you would be the one that would want to have to complete the I-9. And carry the workman's comp. There is some situations where the crew leader is paying them and you're truly just contracting the crew leader, then he would be responsible for that. So yes, but then that's been the world we've been living under with that. You're not required to authenticate, you're required to just receive the document. As long as it doesn't look like it was copied on a scanner or something like that, something made in crayon, you're not required to verify. You just have to do the appropriate and I-9 for all your employees, whether they're foreign or American. That's where some growers kind of get lost. They think if it's American grower, they don't need, or American worker, US citizen, they're not required to have an I-9 for them, but you're required to have it for everybody.
And then another question I was going to ask about Farm Bureau is, how are you guys advocating for New Jersey farmers at the state level and then at the national level too? So I know there's a lot of stuff you're doing. So much of it comes down to policy, and that's what you're working.
That is, immigration has been a top issue for us for a number of years, probably since I've been here. It's been one of the biggest political footballs we've had to deal with because it's so divisive between the two parties that there's very seldom a consensus. It seems like we've gotten several pieces of legislation through one house or the other, either through the Congress or through the Senate, and have never been able to get agreement between the two. So we work with American Farm Bureau, which every state is a subsidiary of American Farm Bureau. They handle a lot of the federal issues. So we work with them on pushing large legislative issues, such as the most recent, Farm Worker Modernization Act, which was the big discussion, recently. We had some issues with that. We felt it didn't go far enough to help the H2A. So we didn't necessarily support it. We didn't oppose it, but we were hoping to get a bill in the Senate that would rectify some of the concerns we had. Namely the wage. That was a big issue. It didn't go far enough to address that. So we'll work with our local representatives if we have a policy on a bill and we support it, we'll reach out to them, we will reach out, we'll encourage members, but we'll work with them personally. On the grand scale, we'll follow American Farm Bureau on the national side, dealing with all DC and all the other representatives within the states. On the state side, we deal mostly with regulations and, immigration doesn't have much play within the state. As far as dealing with farm workers and those type of issues, but it does with regulations. So we'll work with New Jersey. Actually, we just had a meeting with the commissioner of New Jersey Department of Labor to go over. We'll meet with him just to see what did you find this year? What are some of your concerns? What, they do inspections. Is there anything we should be aware of? And then get briefed on anything that we feel we need to share with our workers or our farmers for their workers. And, there will be some changes coming with the child labor regarding working papers. So they gave us a briefing on that's on schedule. That doesn't take place in June, but that's our outreach, trying to find out what's going on.
So can I ask a follow-up question? So you said your major opposition to that bill, which I thought was a good bill in a lot of ways, was the wage.
Yes.
Specifically the unpredictability or
No, the fact that it did not address the farm worker the survey specifically that sets the wage rate. There's the USDA farm worker survey sets the wage. We feel that survey is skewed and is not portraying an accurate wage. Because some states have been seeing some significant increases in 1 year, as high as 20% in some regions. So we felt it did put in a cap at 3% and it could not increase more than 3% and could not decrease more than 1.25%. But one of the concerns was it only froze it for 1 year. And then it would start right back going, with an increase. It's already starting at a point that's too high for some states.
The killer is the real killer is that how unpredictable it is and how you don't find out until December 31st.
Yes, so they published it in
next year when you don't know what your wages,
And that's been a major issue with that whole H2A program. From the perspective of immigration reform is dealing with the wage. The other issue dealt with private right of action. Currently H2A workers aren't covered by the Migrant Seasonal Worker Protection Act. That's an act that comes with a whole additional regulations that migrant workers that are here are protected with. But the big thing is it's not covered. H2A workers aren't covered under that. And when they would move it to allow them to be covered under that, it opens up a whole Pandora's box dealing with private right of action. So now you end up forced to go to federal court to defend yourself against whatever claim the worker may have, or even legal services may impose, So we felt they were two issues nationally that kept American Farm Bureau from full out supporting the question. And the last thing was the number of year-round visas. It was capped at 26,000 per year. So that was a big sticking point. No, it was a component to allow H2A, no. H2A year round. They were creating a new caveat under H2A to allow year-round employment for dairy, per se. And currently dairy is excluded from it because it's not seasonal, it's considered yearly. So this would allow those type of operations to participate, but it was capping the number of visas at 26,000. And that would not have been enough for those that needed it.
Yeah.
So,
Emily, I know Moss Labor's actually doing some stuff for like advocacy, or I just, it's not advocacy, but challenging some of like the AEWR, which I forget what that stands for.
The adverse wage rate.
Wage rate, that kind of stuff. But do you want to talk about that first, or would you rather say, kind of give like a background of H2A and then what Moss Labor does to help farmers get into H2A?
So for your first point, well, it depends. Usually if an employer is willing and if they're kind of a segue, if they're ever audited or ever get a nod or anything like that, our legal team loves fighting back and, pushing those regulations. And I'm sure that we constantly send out updates on associations that we partner with, their lobbying efforts, especially with H2B to get rid of cap relief. But for H2A to get into that, basically, do you mean like in the beginning, we educate the employee?
Yeah, well, even like how the whole program started, like H2A started, if you know, because I don't know the history of that. And then it would be like, if the farmer wants to get into it, but they don't know where to go, how you kind of educate people and all that.
So I don't know exactly where it all started, but to get into it, usually it's you contact us or anybody like us. And basically we will go through all of the compliance pieces that the barriers of entry in the program. So you need housing. You don't have that, you're not going to be able to get in, which ends up being a huge problem. But some employers don't know it can be anything as simple as like a camper on site. And then there is the set wage, you have to provide transportation. There are a lot of barriers of entry, but it ends up being worth it in the end. And we go through all these pieces so that you don't end up getting in trouble with the government and then ending up paying more on the back end. But just to start off, we would kind of take you through all of those requirements, learn a little bit more about your labor needs specifically, and then get you assigned a case manager who would kind of build your job order based on your specific farm or company or whatever you do.
Mm-hmm. And why do you, well, my experience was I talked to other nurseries that were doing this, or just other farms, because I talked to Steve and he said they started using H2A and we were at the farmer's market. My parents just happened to be standing right next to us after I've been saying, I think we should do this. And that was kind of what made us entertain it. But I talked to other nurses that were using H2A and they all told me, don't try and do it yourself. Contact an agency. What would be, I guess, like the pros and cons of using an agency versus doing it yourself?
Well, it is a lot. So to start off with no knowledge at all and just doing it yourself, it's going to be time consuming as well. And if you're trying to do that while also running a business, I don't know how possible that is. If you can take it on your plate, it's a lot of learning when it comes to, when I first started off and I was learning about like the whole program, there are just so many moving parts, so many specific dates that you need to file by, so many different requirements. And there's even things such as like the other day at the Tropical Plant Expo over in Florida, we were talking about some of the things you can get audited for. And they didn't know that literally eggs sitting on the counter, like that's something that you can get audited for. And that's, who would ever know that? So I think it's just a lot easier and more reliable too, because when you have a whole team of people who are studying the subject matter and are there working specifically for you. And we have people boots on the ground in all of these home countries, which also presents a problem for people who self-file. But I think right now we are, if you look at the numbers, it's of like self-filers, it's us and then self-filers and then other companies. You can kind of look at it. Yeah.
Yeah, and Alex, why did you choose to go with an agency versus doing it yourself?
I mean, my feedback to what Emily was just saying, I mean, unless there's people in the room who know differently than I don't know if any of you are self-filers. I generally don't think it's possible to do it without the expertise of, it's like telling an accountant to come and grow plans, you know what I mean? It's that convoluted.
I can.
To the best of my understanding, I don't know anybody who self-files. I mean, I don't know any.
No, but Emily made a big point about having contacts in the home country, because especially during COVID, when that whole thing broke out, they were having issues getting people through the consulates and the interview process. I mean, you have to have somebody there to prepare the workers to go through the interview process at the consulate. And that becomes a real mess if they're not prepared to go through that, and that's what there was a lot of issues with that. But if you're doing it by yourself, you don't have anybody to help facilitate that. And that can be troublesome. So that's, when growers reach out to me, that's one of the things I make mention of, is that, you want to consider that, because, unless you have some contacts there, you could end up, because if they have a problem going through the consulate, you have no recourse,
And I pay an HR person right now, training a new one, to be generally my contact with these guys. If I had to have an HR person who was responsible for all the government filings and all that stuff, I think that the cost associated with that salary would be far above what I'm paying you guys in fees. I mean, to be honest with you, so it's not like you're saving anything by being self-filer, because you need a professional. At least when 80 guys, maybe 2 guys, it's different, one contract, but with what I'm doing, it's not a possibility.
And I guess this is for Emily and Alex. What does that process look like from start to finish? Like, I want
to gray hair.
But it's like, I want to start using H2A employees, and I contact Moss or another agency, something like that. How long does the whole process take? Like, what other kind of things am I doing in that process?
Yeah, so usually what we find is best practice is enrolling with us 120 days in advance of when you want these workers to be coming, just because in that way we can get all your paperwork together, build your job order, and submit all the filings on time. But our cutoff date is day 75, just because we need to be submitting on day 60, and you need to have your housing inspection for your state from the state in by day 45. So that's kind of the timeline, but basically you would call in, we educate you, you enroll, and then we get you set up with your case manager. And I'm not on the case manager side of things, but that's when you start building your job order and start going into all of those filings. And then your case manager is the one who submits every form in the timely manner up until you get your workers, and then they stay on with you while you have your workers in case anything goes wrong. But I know you're more behind the scene, or because you were actually working with the case manager, but yeah.
At some point, what it looks like is you meet someone like Emily, in my case, it's Terry Scott, right? And then, once you make the commitment, I would recommend to anyone to get as much information as possible before making the commitment. There were a lot of things we didn't know about once we were already committed that we're like, are we still doing this? But that's another thing. But learn as much as you can, go to a seminar, learn as much as you can before making the commitment to make sure it's right for you. But as soon as you make that call, a good company, I'm sure there's others out there, I just only got with you guys, will guide you through the process, and it happens quicker than you want. Like, you think, okay, I'm going to say yes. Maybe something's going to come across my desk 2 months from now. Stuff just starts flying. I mean, it's a full-time job to coordinate, depending on how many people you have, to coordinate, internally the H2A program. But it happens quick and it's easy in terms of that first contact,
Mhm.
you know?
Usually my first calls are around an hour long, just because I want to let them know what they're getting into, but we do try and handle as much as possible on our end. Like even if we're helping schedule transportation, I'll even kind of look at what some other HOA employers in the area use for housing. Because that's become a big barrier, but yeah, so when, back to self-filing, that does seem quite impossible, but I mean, props to whoever does it.
Right.
But yeah, we want the employees to be focused more on running their business, and then we can help them get the employees to do so.
But it is like, so even like somebody like yourself. I mean, there's so much. And it's difficult to conceive of you having the ability to fill in a potential client on every little thing. And you never know which little thing is going to affect somebody more than another. It might be somebody's, breaking says, "Nah, this isn't for me." For me, what I did, unfortunately, I did it after I committed, but it turned out okay. In the process, while we were preparing for our first group to come, even though we had contracted with you, we went to a seminar somewhere in South Jersey by a group called AgWorks. You're now, I don't know who bought who, but one of you bought each other. And that was like a full day, giant binder. And that's where it's going to be hard for you to give all the details because you never know which way the conversation is. A presentation where they're making sure that they're covering every single little thing is best thing that anybody can do for themselves who's considering, going into it, in my opinion. I don't know if you guys are going to start doing those sorts of seminars again. I would want one as a refresher personally,
And we did, we bought AgWorks a couple years back, but they've they keep their name just because, they have a lot of longstanding clients, but we are one group of people now, and they continue to do those seminars, and I think they have a few coming up, so.
Steve, do you self-file or do you use, I have an attorney named Gary who does mine.
Okay. Yeah.
Out of everyone that I've spoken to in the past couple weeks about this, I've known one producer that self-files. And he only has a handful of guys. And the only reason why he wants this guy is because another H2A guy from another farm, not related to him, brought his sons up. So that's how he ended up with his H2A guys, instead he brought another guy's sons up. But do you guys see a lot of that? Do you guys see a lot of families that come up through H2A? Or I don't know if you guys have.
I love it.
You like it?
Yeah, I love it. We had a couple. So remember before when we were talking about how like when you're trying to stay up in place with domestic labor, you turn up like a pipeline. Okay, I got this good guy who's in Trenton. When I ask him for somebody, he brings me something. Well, the same thing for us anyways, for like the people coming, we specifically request people from Mexico. Because our H2A program has been growing every year. The first year I had 25 and I doubled it the next and I had 20 the next and I had 20. So the first thing I do when my guys are leaving for the year, say, hey, if you want, I'll take 3 referrals. And we've gotten to know which guys give us the best ones. And they're often family members. And I encourage it and I love it. Like if you got the same, chances are you're gonna have the same work ethic as your brother and dad, versus.
So I only have one more question, and then I want you guys to ask some questions here. I know, I'm sure you guys have some. Mine would be, what would you say is the biggest hurdle into using H2A? Or even just finding labor in general, but I'm thinking in particular H2A. I know there's the housing, transportation, finding employees. What was the hardest, or in your opinion, what do you think is the hardest, and Alex, what was the hardest for you?
I mean, I don't even need a second to think about it, the wage, right? Because at the time, when we went into it, I think we were paying, new people 11 something an hour. And the worst wage to start that particular year was like $13.50 or something like that, right? So that's, I forget exactly that, but it was like a 20% increase in wages that I was gonna take from one year to the next. You got to really believe it's the right thing to do to jump off that cliff, right? Or be really backed up against the wall and have no choice. Believe you have no choice to jump off that cliff because, I mean, look at your books every year. Do you think you can absorb 20% increase in wages and housing and all that stuff. You've got to really believe that. You've got to really know and have lived through all that wasted time bringing in people and training them to get zero production out of them. To, you really have to believe it's the right thing to do because it's quite a walk off the plank there, you know?
Yeah.
So it's the wage, that's the biggest barrier, you know?
Would you say it's been successful though?
Not only would I say it's been successful, I have never met anyone to date who feels like they made a mistake. Honestly, that's the truth.
And that was the feedback I always got, and why we started doing this, people were saying, it was the best decision I made, and this was all across the country, not just in New Jersey. But it was every I didn't talk to a single person who did it, who didn't love it. But maybe it's because those people stopped doing it right away, I don't know. But
And here's an example of when he speaks about the wage, starting with 206 to current 202. Starting, this is the average national wage, you know, where it started. And now it's in the, you know, some states are above 18, but the average is right around 16 and a half. So you can see it's risen dramatically since 2012.
Does it have to be hourly wage or can you choose a salary through that H2A program?
It has to meet the hourly wage rate. So if you pay in salary, they still got to meet the hourly wage rate over that course of time. It's not like they could make, you know, put in less hours one week and get more, put in more hours and get less. It's got to equal that.
and correct me if I'm wrong, but you can pay people more than that. You just
Right.
can't pay anyone less than that, which this year is 1655 in New Jersey.
1355.
The other 10% is flat.
Yeah.
Now, the question I have to you, do you ever run into issues with corresponding employment? Because that's a big hurdle for a lot of growers.
So, I wouldn't say I run into issues with it, but I certainly am aware of it and manage it.
Okay.
I was like. Okay, so. Does everybody know what corresponding employment is? Of course, maybe we should. Corresponding employment means that anybody who lives domestically, lives here. And is doing the same job as these H2A people has to be paid the same as those people, right? So. I, like many others I've heard of, when we first went in, we were paying people $11.50 an hour, and all of a sudden we're going to bring in this group at $13.50 an hour. Like, okay, well, maybe if we say none of the H2A guys can work in the loading dock, you know, and the loading dock people, you know, can be less skilled people, and they're going to make $11.50. The H2A guy, I was advised, and right, because it never works. You always move people around all day long, right? I was advised early on. From day one, I did it like this. Anybody who lives, breathes, walks on your property makes $16.50 an hour or whatever the average wage is. And that could, whatever, right? So to me, that's why corresponding employment is not an issue, because I just do it that way. I know one person who does it a little bit differently, and I think he's still involved in a lawsuit over it, you know?
Yeah, I know there's others, and that's, you know, and that's usually when I tell, you know, growers become very concerned because. You know, you have certain workers that may not feel, you know, obviously are making less, and that's going to bump pretty much most of their payroll up. So, you know, ties into the expenses.
Yeah, and just a real world example of this too is a farmer I talked to that was also in Chesterfield, used H2A employees and had as a summer worker, high school kid helping out in the summer, and that was making minimum wage. And because they didn't keep track of when the high school kid was working with the H2A guys and actually haven't differentiated, they got audited and had to pay that high school kid an extra, like, whatever, $4 an hour to match what, because they didn't know, they crossed paths a couple of times. And that's one of the things when we like to bring in high school kids to help out and learn about agriculture and all that. But it affects that thinking because it's used to be, oh, even last year, we pay them $13 an hour. And now it's like, well, but you can't work here and you can't work, but you couldn't have them cross paths, and it made it actually a little bit of a hurdle to bring on those kids and help them, because you're constantly saying, yeah, you can't work in this area or with these people and, which was tricky. But,
Oh, is that?
yeah, so what other questions do you guys have?
So I was wondering, so do these, I mean, I don't know how it works visa wise, but is there a set time period for the visas or does it depend on the aspect of agriculture per se that they're working in?
So you can have them for up to 10 months. It just depends on your seasonality. We just have to make sure there are 2 months where they're not here. They have to be sent home, but.
Is there is there a minimum length of time they have to stay too? Okay.
I mean, it might be harder for, like, I don't know.
Mhm.
It depends. It might be harder to get them to actually like come if it's gonna be only like 1 month, but I've seen people with 2-3 month long contracts. Cause you can always transfer workers from employer to employer too. So if they're already here for 8 months, they can stay in country technically for 3 years. But they can only stay with the same employer for like 10-month periods. So.
And to clarify, correct me if I'm wrong, to clarify, you define your seasons, right? So you have needs, it's not like the growing season is March through November. That's the only time any of us are allowed to have. If you have winter needs, right? And if you have 12-month-a-year needs, you just open 2 contracts. One that's going to be for 10 months, meaning March through December, right? And one that's going to be January through, but someone's saying maybe not.
Well, it would be like 2 different jobs, like.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, because then it'd be like you're technically doing cell phones, it'd have to be 2 different.
So my real world application of that is that I have IPM needs, especially as a rose producer, IPM needs now.
Mhm.
Right, so I just opened up a winter, I just had to go to the New Everest week on Monday because I had a contract start Monday.
Yep.
Right, those guys are here 10 months, so it is, I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
Right, and that's. Yeah, that's the facts, yes, you're right.
Yeah, what other questions are there?
I'm debating bringing an employee on this year, but I only need 1 person and it's explicitly machine operation and truck driving. Would that even be worth looking into? Would that pencil out with H2A or?
I mean, we have people bring on 1 all the time. I just had a call the other day and he only needs 1 worker. And what you can do is as long as they're working like on your farm, it like depending on how long you want to keep them, you could also have them build fences on your yard, like repair your barn or anything like that. They can do all of that for you as well. But 1 is perfectly doable and we see it done all the time.
Do they have resumes I can review beforehand?
So we do the recruiting and screening, and we will give you like a short list of people and then you can look at their work history, all that. You can contact them. Usually employers don't, but you can, and then whoever you choose, we can send over to you.
Wasn't there a new regulation of sorts where there's like a new pay scale if someone is a truck driver? Didn't I see something like that like last year or 2 years ago?
If it is like long haul trucking, they need CDL licenses, and then CDL drivers are a lot more competitive.
Right,
That is the A word, but usually employers pay above the A word
Yeah.
just so that they.
Okay.
Yeah,
It all
you're right, though. There was,
something,
yeah,
you guys told me. about
there was a rule. I don't think it's been finalized yet. But they're looking to creating a separate AWAR for I forget the actual terminology they use, but for a truck driver or somebody.
Yeah,
That's in more of a skill position. Yeah, they're looking to create another wage. I think it's been held up, but they were doing that. Yeah.
Right, Richard had told me something about that.
Yeah.
About that, but
And Alex, to follow up on that, is that a position you look for domestically? And have you had success finding like a machine operated truck driver domestically? Other than the ones.
I'm challenged.
By the way.
I've been very challenged to find truck drivers. I have not gone through the H2A program to do it.
Mhm.
Probably will be forced that way soon enough. I can't find anybody. So, but no, I have not.
So, and then what other kind of jobs can you hire for through H2A or that kind of thing?
Anything, like any type of, if you are growing anything,
As long as it's
That-
agriculture.
as long as it's agriculture based, so. That all qualifies, it just has to be technically primary or secondary agriculture, so like work done on a farm. By a farmer or in support of the farm, so,
I need some clarification on that because
yes.
I had thought I'd ask that question. Because I can't find mechanics these days, and if I can find mechanics through the H2A program, I'm on it. I thought Richard had told me it has to be primarily that they're doing agricultural work.
So they can do, would their only like job be like the mechanic work, like they need to work.
90% of the time mechanic, yeah, a mechanic, yes, they're not like 50% on the farm, 50% in the shop, and I mean, like, you know, it's full-time job in nursery with mechanic.
Yeah, see, that's why I would qualify as H2B, because you can, the H2A work,
Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, no, you could do H2B, but the H2B is the CAPT program. So
Yeah, sorry.
you don't have to do the housing or the transportation. And anyways, but if the, like, what kind of, are they just like working?
Working on tractors, working on trucks, working on heaters, working on the house, the H2A houses. And mechanic maintenance.
Yeah, so you can have the current H2A workers do some of that and sprinkle it in, but you can't hire somebody to solely do that.
That's
for
right, you
H2A,
cannot,
yeah.
right, you cannot, right, that's what I thought, right?
Yeah. What other questions are there? With Steve and Rebecca, what's your biggest hurdle with H2A been?
Housing and acclimating to being inspected. Primarily by the state and then secondarily surprise inspected by the federal at any time.
Hasn't been.
Yes.
Yeah, I heard of a couple people in our area that had the federal
Yeah.
inspection done. We didn't get it. I guess you didn't get it, but I heard a couple
John
of.
Hunter got inspected, another grower near me, and he called me and said. I got inspected, you may wanna.
That's what we got a phone call saying, oh, that we just got
Brush off.
inspected. You may want to prepare for this.
And
Mm.
it's difficult because it doesn't seem like. The real. Buzzword problems for the state.
Mhm.
Like I have a 2-story building that my guys live in, I need a ladder attached to my building.
Yeah,
And
I found out about that.
So that's just,
a random place. Yeah.
so that's like their bugaboo, they really hate that,
Yeah,
but the feds. Didn't even notice it wasn't up still,
yeah.
like I took it down to paint my house and put it back up, you know, I didn't put it back up, I should have, but I didn't.
Mhm.
I didn't get a fine for that because. The feds weren't looking on the same list, so a big hurdle that has been for us is not a very, very clear posting of housing violations. That I can find easily.
So the feds didn't have an issue with it, but the state did.
That's right.
Yeah.
The state didn't because it was up.
So I had learned about that particular situation by going to that AdWords seminar. And the guy said, like, you guys are real good, you give us a housing checklist, it says all the things you gotta worry about. But that's not even close to when the feds come in and inspect, and like, they're looking at a whole different set of things. But I do have a question, when you say you got inspected, was it just the housing inspection, or did you get the audit?
Also,
You got the audit to the whole kit.
Oh, yeah, they usually do the whole thing. When they come out, they'll inspect the payroll, the housing, motor vehicles, and field sanitation. They inspect all of that when they come out.
Yeah, that was a big hurdle for us too, is housing, because we're maxed out in space on our farm, so we couldn't bring anything temporary, so we went out. And we don't have any houses that are occupied on our farm, so we had to go and rent housing at this year we did an apartment complex and then a house. But then I found out I missed the latter part on the checklist, so it was my fault that I missed it, and I rented a place, and then. Talking to the New Jersey Department of Labor said, oh, you have a fire escape on your second floor. But at the same time, the inspectors I've had from the state tend to be really understanding. In at least the ones I've had.
No, I would say the state, because they're doing a courteous inspection. They're
Yeah.
much more lenient, the worst they will do is deny you or, turn you down, which obviously would impact your H2A certification, but the federal government's out there enforcing.
Yeah,
So, yes,
Okay.
they are much more.
yeah, because that was with the fire escape ladder. With the person from the Department of Labor told me I couldn't get her to say it in writing. I wanted an email. But I was like, do I have to go out and get like a real deal fire escape? And she's like, just go to Home Depot and get a ladder and attach it to the side of the house. And I'm like, really? And I told you about this too. So I'm like, is this real? Because I don't know if this is.
You know what's interesting about that?
But
Up until last year, so my first 2 years we got the inspection. It was fine just to have the box with the rollout ladder sitting up on the 3rd floor.
yeah,
And it's like a new thing. All of a sudden they're looking for the fire escape.
Yeah.
Last year I had to put in ladders and
Mhm.
I just put in one today on my new residence. It's getting inspected Monday, but it's kind of a new thing.
yeah,
I mean,
And that's the issue because you're dealing with different inspectors and
Right.
every inspector has their own nuance to them and,
Yep.
and that's what it says, fixed ladder, but I knew some of the inspectors. The old school probably would say, all right, you have a safety, that's fine. And,
Mhm.
it's like any inspection.
yeah,
Sometimes it's a matter of who you get.
yeah, I mean, yeah.
Like New Jersey, I've heard a lot of last year before, a lot of issues regarding the New Jersey inspections for the your H2A. That they had new people and they're out there measuring and everything. It's, it's a constant nightmare because you do have turnover and you get new people and. They don't quite understand and going by the book. But, the house has been approved for the same occupancy for years and now they're out there remeasuring everything.
Every time they
My,
mention.
my problem is I can't find the book. Anywhere, like federal inspection book.
yeah.
Like what are these things that I'm trying to abide by, but I. Can't seem to find
I
that.
can give you it's a backsheet checklist on the square footage,
Mhm.
what you're required to have, how far the toilets have to be away if you're using portable toilets. I can get something like that, sure.
Mhm.
Yeah, just get the checklist they use,
What's that?
and just get the checklist they use, that'd be the easiest.
No, I've tried.
I think.
It's basically going down the list of their regulations. It's,
Yeah.
So I have the one you're talking about.
Yeah.
Provided to you guys.
mm,
I believe at that ag work seminar, and if I'm wrong, I apologize. If I'm right, I'll send it to Tom and to you, and you can disperse it amongst everyone. I think in that ag work seminar binder, there is a much more highly detailed federal list. If I have it, I will send it to you
Yeah,
guys.
I'd be real interested.
I might be
You
wrong.
get it out to everybody.
I might be wrong, but I think it's in there. I think it's in there.
If you don't have that.
Okay. Yeah.
Probably don't.
Okay. Yeah.
And Rebecca, what's been like the biggest hurdle for you because you've been with your dad, you've been doing it for a long time now,
Yeah,
right?
as long as I can remember.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think going off what everyone's kind of talked about, the fire codes, especially having that conflict between state and federal inspections, depending on what they're looking for and the constant changing of those regulations, and then the wage rates, a huge impact. I mean, we have found obviously the value of doing H2A, so it's worth that extra money, but like these increases every year are just insanely large.
Mhm.
And then like for us, especially like some of our key drivers are from Belize and they were knocked off the list, so we weren't able to get H2As from that country.
Mhm.
So having a little bit of uncertainty where our key people weren't able to come back for 2 years because Belize was knocked off. Was another challenge that we've kind of had to work through as well.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
as far as what I've seen.
Yeah, and I had, just playing off what Rebecca said, what was a plus for us is that you can get the same people back year after year. So you're still training them once, and what's the
And it-
longest anyone's been with your farm?
I would say probably more than 15 years.
Yeah.
And if it's 15 years and they stop coming back, their kids come or their brother comes
Mm-hmm.
or their cousin comes or everyone in the family.
Like they were saying, getting recommendations from people, their family members
Yeah.
have been incredibly helpful,
Yeah.
so.
And we have some that'll leave for a few years and come back because they'll have kids or something,
Mhm.
and then they'll bring their brother with them at the same time, and it's many generations for many years.
And the great thing is like, I'm sure you guys are the same. I have some of them in my most key
Mhm.
positions, supervisory positions, they're beyond labor now, and they're, the order picking supervisor or whatever, and, it's not piping, every guy's not perfect.
Mhm.
But man, there's some good people coming up.
Yeah.
Doing great things.
And they like to do it. They like to do it. They like going home for 3-4 months and then coming back and, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and we brought in 4 guys this year, and all of them were really good, but 2 of them were really, really good, and our managers were fighting over
Yeah, right.
who was gonna, who are these guys actually gonna work with, because I need them on my team, and I need them on my team, and we haven't had that domestically in a long time. So it was kind of fun to see that you have someone who's really passionate about being here and all that. But
I have a question on the same thing, because I have one guy in particular who is in my top 10 employees now. He's awesome. He's got no interest in going home to his wife and children. He wants to be here 12 months a year. I would love to have him 12 months a year. Seasonality. Does anybody have experience or knowledge in getting the green card or whatever for anybody?
So I can connect you with my dad, because we've done a few people through like
Yeah.
the perm system where you're able to start the application when they're home, and it's a whole system, and it depends, like we've had it take a year, we've had it take more, really just depends.
Yeah.
But we've done it, and I think we have 3 or 4 people on it right now. And it's been really successful, but I know like our firm that we use for H2A was able to help us with that as well, so.
Oh, is that right?
I think,
We do that too. If he's been here at least, went home, went back at least like 3 years, then, yeah. You
Yeah,
could.
so we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
yeah, I didn't know that was that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
if they want to stay, but yeah. it's also-
Yeah.
Is it expensive
I don't know.
to work?
I think the legal fees are,
Legal fees are-
but the green card is too, but I think that falls on them, but
Have
again.
you gotten in as quick as a year, Rebecca?
Well,
That's
the
pretty
first stage,
impressive.
this first stage is work authorization, then it's
Yes, okay,
something else, then it's green card, so
Okay.
we've gotten work authorization in as little as a year.
okay.
There's no rhyme or reason whatsoever, because 2 people
Yeah.
in the same country, one will take 3 years, the
Yeah.
other will take 1.
And we've had it where one applied a year and a half before the other, and the other got work off first.
Okay.
So it's completely random, but yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it's been about an hour. I don't want to keep anybody here too long, but especially you guys here too long, because you got another hour drive. But are there any 1, 2 last questions that you guys have that you want to learn more about, just fine labor, H2A, any of that kind of stuff? Yeah,
One of the things that some of my friends in other states have talked about that's coming down the pipeline for H2A is a mandatory overtime over 40 hours.
But
Yeah, for any kind of labor. I think New York's and state of New York this year.
Yeah.
New York,
Well, it's Pandora's box. Once
New
that
York
kind of
is
thing
phased
comes up. So over 40 hours. You're obligated to pay them 5.5. So
Mhm.
it's a different game. I mean, I have some guys that work like 80 hours, maybe more, some days till 3 in the morning, every day of the week. So it's,
so, wait a second, so you're saying this has already happened?
no, it's happened, well, California is they were one of the first ones to do it, and they're just getting to their 40 hours now. I think it was a 5-year phase in. New York just passed legislation last year to implement it. Now they went to 60, they went from unlimited to 60 hours, and then they had a commission decide whether to bring it down to 40. And they voted on it, but I think it's I want to say 10-year phase in. It's a pretty lengthy,
Okay,
but I mean, yes, they are going to work down to 40 hours. So it's happened to New York.
what do you mean work down to 40 hours?
In other words, they're going to pay, I think it's 60, then it goes to 56, 52, and works its way down to 40 over that.
So anything over 40 time then.
Right.
So. What does that apply to? Are you saying that's just if you're in the Golden Age trade program, this is what it is? Or some states are getting rid of the federal overtime exemption?
Yeah, they have a state overtime and an overtime exemption and are getting rid of that.
So, right, so then it just applies, so it's not something that's exclusive
It's
to
not
H2A. It's
All ag.
There's nothing we do about it, it's we're.
Yeah,
Doing non-H2A.
It's just all ag, we're calling it all employees.
Right.
And, you know, it's very contagious when it gets that close.
I'm with you, I know, I should, these hours look like, there's guys out there at 80 all the time,
Yeah.
you know, I can't stop them from working, they want it.
And it's an issue because the workers are upset because the growers, you know, they're here for a short period of time. They want the hours. And, you know, a lot of cases, they are trying to bring in more workers to avoid you know, it's a double-edged sword, and the workers aren't necessarily benefiting from it, but, you know, it's growing across the country.
So I got a good question for you. I mean, I can stop also, but this is a good thing. There's, you know, there's people with other experiences, especially since you've been audited on that. Because Richard has warned me that you better represent your hours correctly when you do your contract. Right? So if the guys are working 80, but you're saying your contract is 45, they're gonna say, oh, well, you know, you try to, you know, minimize the hours in your recruiting in the United States, so that way you know, you could get more people from Mexico. So how'd you make out on that on the audit? Like, what, how many hours do you have in your contract, and what do they say when they see people working 80 hours?
I think my contract was for 40,
Right,
45, whatever the minimum was,
Yes.
but I mean, that's an average across. The contract.
yeah, oh, no, I
Not
get that,
every
yeah.
week was, you know, 80, 100 hour week, but. Some of them, I mean, every
Right.
single one of them was over.
So you didn't get fined on that?
No.
Okay.
I haven't heard that being questioned yet.
Yeah, I've been warned about it.
Okay.
But yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Because I just, you know, I'm with you, let it rip, man. You guys want to work with, you know,
The only way they can get ahead.
right? And they don't want to see me bring in 40 more guys so that I'm limiting their hours to 50. They want to, like, they don't want to sit in a room with 20 guys in the house and sit around and do nothing, you know, they want to, they're here to work.
Those hours are made up after 6 p.m. You know,
Right.
they're the night hours, so we're not like. We're already out there. I'm not gonna bring in the night shift
Right.
to finish the job out.
And I get it, you know, seriously, like I go into the house sometimes to say hi, you know, they're just bored.
Yeah.
Sitting around, you know.
We have one more question? We're all good. Yes.
So generally speaking, is there a primary country that you guys find most of the employees at, or does it vary?
More often than not, people do recruit from Mexico because it's usually the cheapest. You can get them here by bus rather than getting a plane, and then the consulate in Monterey. By far processes the most H2A visas, so usually Mexico.
Have you had any, I guess, inquiries from the government regarding the triangle countries they refer to them as?
The Northern Triangle.
They're trying to
Yeah.
promote.
That's mainly been like H2B.
Oh, really? I've heard it in the H2A, really trying to promote, I guess, those countries.
Well, I think with the H2A, it can't be enforced as much, like, because the H2B has a cap, so then
Yeah.
they'll assign some to the Northern Triangle countries.
I saw they assigned a specific number of visas to.
And we don't think that's even gonna be used up,
Really.
like, this year, so.
But I know, I guess because of the economics there, I've been on several AFBF where they had representatives from there trying to promote workers from those countries. But I think the expense of getting it here makes it difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
So back to your point where, well, if you were gonna do mechanics, solely mechanics, but that would be more of an H2B. Can I be an H2A and an H2B board?
Yes.
Can
You guys do that, right?
I? Also,
Yeah.
you do.
Yep, we're both.
Oh, and back to what you were saying earlier, did they come in during your business hours? Because you can be like, come back later, like, you know. like, right?
I did tell them. come.
Okay,
I
good.
did tell them, to go back later. They said no.
Oh,
They said we're here. Oh, all right. Good to hear.
We're both, but they completely different job orders, completely different jobs, they
Yeah.
can't all work
Mhm.
together, but yeah,
Yeah.
'cause we're incredibly retail oriented as well as our production team. So we heavily rely on H2B, which is unfortunate because of the cap, but yeah.
I already know I'm gonna do it, I mean, I seriously, I didn't know, never thought of that angle, but
Mhm.
I can't find mechanics and,
Yeah, I mean, we can't either.
you know, why not just do it H2B and I'll live in the house. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, well, thank you guys very much. This was really exciting. Yeah, so, you guys are more than free to go or hang out, or we just want to talk for a couple minutes kind of about what YFR is, because we have some new faces here. And some of the benefits and things you can do through